My name is Anton Fliri. I'm a medicinal chemist. I have about 30 years experience in drug design. I grew up in Austria, went to a Catholic boarding school, got my PhD at the Leopold Franzens University in Innsbruck, one of the world leading institutions in quantum optics and quantum mechanics, quantum computing. I finished my thesis with a synthesis of biotin, the vitamin most likely many of you have been taking or are taking. That was patented by Roche. But it ultimately gave me an invitation to join a Nobel Prize winner at Harvard University. At Harvard University, I was part of a team which synthesized an antibiotic which may be life-saving for many of you too, which is Citromax. When my team departed because of the death of Professor Woodward, one of the premier chemists in the world at that time, I joined a laboratory again as a Nobel Prize winner, Professor Eschenmoser, and worked on chemistry, the origin of life. Okay, so that's essentially what I started. And after that, I worked in cancer research and neuroscience research at Pfizer. I started to think about leaving the pharmaceutical area based on the experience that a lot of the thinking what we have, how drugs are developed, there's a lot of money to be made. A tremendous amount of money gets put into the industry, but ultimately not a lot of things which come out of it are really helping people to stay healthy. It's one of the things you have a very narrow focus of what you want to do with those medicines, but then ultimately you are confronted with many, many side effects. That makes you realize we really don't fully understand how the body reacts to drugs. And based on the experience, quit Pfizer, started to think about, can we actually do better than that? Can we come up with a much deeper understanding how nature actually is healing and how ultimately everything in our body interacts? How can we actually help the body to heal itself? And can we actually come up with affordable medicine by looking at nature's healing power, particularly looking at how the old Chinese, how the old Indians, and how the old American Indians actually were healing people with plants and roots. So based on that, we developed a brand new technology. Technology really is looking at how does the body communicate, how do all of the different pieces in the body, how do they exchange information, how is it passed on? So it's really a computer which in a way is information processing. Everything in the body cooperates. It's like swarm-based cooperation there. It's like when you look at an ant, single ant is stupid. But when you take 100,000 ants together, they get smart. And so that's the body, when you have all of those different cells alone, they're pretty stupid. But when you put them together, you have fantastic machines. And that's really what we have now with a technology where we can actually look at how things talk to each other. We can look at every single tissue in your body and then figure out how plants affect the dialogue between them. And that's really where we now are able to come up with a much smarter way of how you put things together. When they start to put together, how do they change the dialogue? How do they change the dialogue between them? And how they ultimately affect your health? And we want to come up with something which works, and which is affordable and sustainable. And that's really where the meeting of the mind with Nikki comes, because we believe that actually, if you want to help people, you have to make medicines affordable. But not only affordable, you have to make them safe and effective. Not just something in that term which is a supplement, you take it and you think like it works. No, what you have to really figure out is how do you put those things together like those ancient healers have done. And where they go out and actually look at your eyes, look at your tongue, figure out what's wrong with you, and then they go back in the backyard and come up with something which is unique for you. So we want to help you. And my mission is to take my education, my experience, and make it working for you. And Mickey is a perfect partner for that. So I'm happy to have met him. His integrity, his passion is my passion as well. I just love the guy. So let's start with vitamin D. Everybody vitamin D. A lot of immune formulas are vitamin D. Vitamin D comes in the form, when you eat it, it's a precursor of an active form of vitamin D called calcitriol. But it takes time to convert it from an inactive form to the active form. When you don't make that fast enough, the inactive form of vitamin D actually is not necessarily benign, because if it gets stored in the fat tissue of your body, so you have to tap into the healing power of that stuff. You have to make more of the active form. When you look at the left side, you have arginine. Arginine allows you to make more of the active form of vitamin D faster. There's two ways how arginine is doing. One, ultimately, it taps into the natural way how vitamin D is activated in your kidney. Arginine is a precursor to nitric oxide. Arginine is used by the body to make nitric oxide. That nitric oxide helps to activate vitamin D in the kidney. But it also, from the innate immune system, important is the macrophages, which help as a first-line defense system, they also activate vitamin D. And for that activation step, arginine is essential. So you have now two functions where arginine helps in your immune defense system. A, by making more and more faster the active form of vitamin D, and B, it helps the macrophages, which are about to make the active form of vitamin D. Why do you need active form of vitamin D? Because vitamin D makes things which are called catalycidins, so that are broad spectrum anti-infective, which kill viruses, fungi, bacteria, and stuff like that. So the combination arginine and vitamin D particularly is great for irritable bowel syndrome. The arginine and vitamin D combination is ideal actually for that. The quercetin is interesting. Arginine helps to make nitric oxide. Arginine does not only make the good form of arginine, nitric oxide, but also the bad form. The bad form ultimately gives you more inflammation. Quercetin stops arginine being used to make the bad form of nitric oxide. Okay. The same thing happens with hesperidin. Hesperidin makes arginine, it forces arginine to make the endothelial specific nitric oxide. That's the good form of nitric oxide. So quercetin and hesperidin work together. Hesperidin is much faster than quercetin. So when you give arginine and hesperidin together, you make the good form of nitric oxide, and that makes the good form of vitamin D, and that ultimately helps you now to make more of the anti-defense mechanism, which you need in that to get rid of the bugs. So those three together give you a healthy dose of nitric oxide and give you strengthens the innate immune responses. Zinc ascorbate, it's an antioxidant. It's actually a super antioxidant. Quercetin and hesperidin become much more active when you have zinc ascorbate. There's another trick when you look at how the innate immune system works. It hits the enemy very hard, and very often you feel that like inflammation, when it hurts, your joints swell. So that's an inflammatory response. But you don't want to end that hanging around. If that doesn't get tuned down, you have chronic inflammation, you get diabetes, you get Alzheimer's disease. It's really controlling the effectiveness of the immune system and preventing long-lasting inflammation. You need to keep it in balance. We have that type of product now. It allows you to give you the punch at the innate immune system level, but it also helps down-regulate chronic inflammation in your lifetime. So it slows down your development of diabetes, potentially. It slows down your development of all kinds of, over 500 diseases. What we have is cardiovascular disease, heart diseases, liver diseases, kidney diseases, the Alzheimer's diseases. All that, those are the major killers, and all of those things are benefiting because the system itself, what we have is fierce immunity, it down-regulates chronic inflammation. The way it is doing it is a little bit complicated because you have two different macro. One causes inflammation and the other one, and that causes healing. Now, if you have not enough inflammation, that's bad because it doesn't give you the punch against the enemy. Too much inflammation, you get sick. Too much healing is bad because if you have too much healing, you have fibrosis. You have lung fibrosis, liver fibrosis, kidney fibrosis, deadly too. Cardiac fibrosis kills a lot of people. So here you have something with quercetin, stopping fibrosis. So you have a system now which actually is designed to be used in the long term. It also gives you a way of slowing down the aging of the immune system. Okay, it's called inflammaging. Quercetin and hesperidin allow you to stop the inflammaging. So the combination of nitric oxide, arginine, vitamin D, quercetin, and hesperidin is an anti-inflammatory. It's also anti-senescent. Anti-senescent means it kills the cells which make you old. The product slows down a lot of the aging-related diseases and comorbidities. The fierce immunity starts out with giving you the exact defense when you need it, but it not only gives you the defense against bacteria, it also gives defense against your illness and chronic illnesses. So that's essentially what they call the miracle of fierce immunity.
One thing I want to mention to everyone out there, because when I first saw the list of these 5 ingredients, I thought, well, I've seen these in other products and I can get these over the counter from any of my doctor friends and put them together and do all of this. And what I learned and now understand intimately, and I'll use this as a metaphor for the layman's like myself, the amount of the ingredients in Fierce Immunity is the perfect blend. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes a difference. So consider it like this. Anyone can make a stew. If you look at the ingredients of a good stew, you'll see all the same ingredients. But what would happen if you put a grain of salt and you see on the list salt? You put 1 grain of salt in, nothing. What would happen if you put a pound of salt in? It would ruin the entire stew. Just because we have a list of all these ingredients doesn't mean we're going to have a good stew, an effective stew, a good medicine. And so if you could talk about the trillions of data points that had you arrive at what you believe to be the perfect formula, the perfect amount of each of these ingredients, which is why they work in tandem and actually amplify their individual and collective power.
So the 2 different questions that ultimately the amount of the ingredients determines how fast they act. You know, when I mentioned something like arginine and hesperidin, they go in the bloodstream very fast. Okay, quercetin, vitamin D, a little bit slower. So what happens when you load the system with arginine without hesperidin? Taking arginine creates nitric oxide in there, and it doesn't really care that it makes a lot of nitric oxide. But that's not what you want, particularly if you have diabetes or inflammation. It makes the inflammation worse. So you need hesperidin in there because hesperidin puts on the brake. And because those things is fast, you have to be able to put on the brake on now, okay, and not an hour later and half an hour later. So when you take those supplements separate, what happens here? First of all, the amounts are important because you don't want to overkill the nitric oxide production either, because you need some of that stuff as a defense mechanism. So if you get too much, it's a no good. If it's not enough, it's no good. You have to eat them together in the right amounts to get the benefit. When you take those supplements together, you don't know how fast they dissolve. If you have them not as a powder, you have to be able to figure out exactly how do you weigh those things out. It's a little bit cumbersome. You can do it. But the timing is essential, because when you act in the immune system, 10 minutes matters. I'm telling you, it's amazing how fast those things are working. You need to be able in that to be fast, so those interactions are fast. You need to have the things there when you need them. And if, by the way, you don't know when you need them, because the innate immune system is designed that it protects you without you even knowing that they are protected, okay? Because it's so fast and effective. You need to keep the balances of all of the things. Vitamin D, for example. If you are not able to convert the things reasonably fast into the active form, you know, it's vitamin D, the inactive form, could cause fibrosis. So if you don't have that vitamin D, for example, in the presence of hesperidin and quercetin prevent us overhealing, so you don't get fibrosis in the long run. All of those things carefully balanced because they have specific roles at different time points, some immediately and some in the long term. When you take a product like that, you want to looking out as if I take that for the rest of my life, what are the consequences? Not just I'm taking them away because COVID is around or whatever is around. You need to be able to protect and support all of your organs and systems throughout your life. That's where the technology comes in. When we analyze 4,000 different diseases, how they are talking to each other, or we analyze 30 different substances, drugs, plants together. If we talk about trillions of data points, trillions of trillions simultaneously, we have a specific swarm algorithm where we actually divide the body into swarms, which are specifically in that for every single tissue and for every single functions in your body. We have specific swarms. And what we find out how those different diseases affect every single one of those swarms and how they organize and self-organize when you get a disease, when you take an ingredient, combination of ingredients. Do they actually make a melody together which sounds good, or they actually make just this awful noise wiping each other out? That is the technology what we're having. You will never be able to do this with artificial intelligence. Okay, that's not, the machines are not capable to do what we can do with that stuff. So it is really in that terms taking nature's intelligence and making it working for you. Okay, because we can now model not just what it does to your bones, but beyond bone health, you have a lot of other things which are going on simultaneously, and they do see vitamin D what happens else? When it allows you to look at the big picture and not just something because you happen to study it and you happen to know a little bit about it and you think it's good for that. If you have something else, is this good for that too? No. So you need to understand how those things interrelate, because life and your body everything is in balance. That's what nature is and what health is. Keep it balanced. Okay, and that's what fierce immunity is designed to do, restoring the balance of different things. Now for children, you have zinc and vitamin D in the product. For children, I would recommend, if they are less than 10 years old, take half of it. Instead of 3 tablets, give them 1 tablet. So I wouldn't give them 3 tablets for children less than 10 years old.